So welcome to another episode of Structo's Meet the Writer. This is a short form video series where we talk to the poets and writers who have contributed work to the new issue, Structo 20. So today I'm talking to Kate Feld. Hi, Kate.
Hey.
So we have a piece from you which you submitted in the poetry track, and we'll get onto that in a sec. But you've agreed to read the first section from it. So yeah, in your own time.
Okay, this is Horse. As you know, there's too much space inside the women on the morning road. You've got to get very deep into their tunnels to find the creature hibernating. I dream of taking each one by the face, opening their jaws like a hinge and bellowing down until they wake up, until they take a big breath and finally expand out to occupy every bit of their casing, like drawing on a glove and pulling taut the little cups at the tips of the fingers, or pushing their spirit toes right up against the seam of their skins. I dream of doing this, but it is not allowed. The other women have to wake themselves up. That is the rule.
Great, thanks very much. I just wanted to give people a flavor of the piece, which is about, I know it's like a page and a half, page and 2/3 formatted. Partly because, yeah, as I say, this is technically a poem in our definition of how the slight differences in formatting we use to typeset things. And yet it could quite easily have been a short story. That seems to be a thread running through a lot of your work. Is that fair to say, the kind of cross-boundary thing?
Yeah, I mean, it actually could even be a short essay because it is based on things that really happened. So it could kind of be
so
all
many
of
questions.
things.
So many questions.
And yeah, that's a huge theme for me in my work. My practice kind of occupies multiple forms at once, or none of them, or exists somewhere in between them often. And that is something that just naturally happened with me in my writing, really. And I like it. I mean, I think I like the fact that it isn't, you can't look at it and say, oh yeah, that's a poem, you know what I mean? Or that's a short story. Like, yeah. To me, it seems kind of more lively that way, I suppose. When I read other things that are like that, that's how I respond to it.
Yeah, I completely agree. As a reader, I don't give a shit about genre boundaries. I worked as a bookseller while I was in kind of last few years of school, and there genres are incredibly important. So when you're filing books onto the shelves, and it's like, where do you put Margaret Atwood? That's very important. But as a reader, it really matters so little. It's just what you like, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you find that tricky when you're trying to talk about your work, or trying to, I guess, market your work in the broadest possible sense?
Well, it's funny you should say that because what I did right before talking to you was sending my manuscript out, which I just started doing. And yeah, it is a little bit awkward because I have stuff that I guess perhaps is most like prose poetry. I have stuff that is most like fiction, but sort of a fragmentary fiction. And then I have stuff that is definitely some flavor of creative nonfiction, and maybe some of those things or a couple of those things at once. So yeah, what do you do with that in the contemporary book market? It's like, so the fortunate thing is I have no intention of like trying to foist this off on some mainstream press. I'm definitely going for, the small independent people who are up for experimental stuff. So yeah, and that's fine. Like I'm quite happy with that. So
in a sense, it's for other people to decide what it is, right?
Totally. I have no like nothing invested. I have no skin in that game, call it whatever the hell you want. I just call them pieces, sometimes because it's easier. I don't actually care like what people want to call them, really.
So your kind of day job is you're a lecturer in digital journalism at Salford University in the UK.
Yeah.
But did you have training in, what was your educational background in that case? If you have such disregard for the rules of genre, were you, is that because you were taught them or because you weren't taught them?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think that I I worked for many years as a journalist. You know, I have a master's in journalism, and I started out as a newspaper journalist. And I really was writing for many years. You know, for most of my writing career, the most restricted kind of writing. You know, kind of news style. Very. I even worked for the Associated Press for a while. You know,
Oh,
which is very rigid style of writing. So I didn't really start doing creative writing seriously until I was about 40, really. And I'd been a journalist for quite a long time then. So I think that perhaps after all of that rigidity, I was sort of like, okay, you know, like,
yeah.
I'm just gonna see what I can do. And there's a lot of rigor, you know, hopefully in the writing that I do, but it's not um, formal rigor in that way, you know. So perhaps it was a response to that. I don't know.
And in terms of you're teaching journalism at the moment,
Yeah.
specifically digital journalism, and given that your background is quite a broad one in your journalists on the journalism side, do you find that there's a very specific difference in the way those two areas of journalism are approached? And is that changing quickly? And I know it's an enormous question, but
You mean,
in terms of the way you write for digital journalism as opposed to perhaps traditional print journalism or broadcast journalism, and are those tools different for the people you're teaching?
oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that the kind of, you know, the way we read and write in society, in culture is changing all the time. It's
Yeah.
changing very, very quickly. I mean, I think that, you know, I teach people how to be multimedia journalists who are they're
Oh,
writing
wow,
across
okay.
multiple platforms. So there is for each platform, you know, a kind of writing that works, a kind of storytelling that works. And that, of course, has, you know, an effect like at the word level that influences the choices that you make. But, you know, yeah, I mean, it's changing a lot, but it also isn't changing though, because ultimately good writing is still really, really, really important. You know, it's
Yeah.
still the thing that makes or breaks something, you know. So I think that it's just how it can be good is different, really.
Yeah. And are you teaching at the moment? Are classes going back, or are you doing things remotely? I know it's different depending on the institution.
Yeah, so, well, ask me tomorrow. I may have a different answer for you, but
Okay.
you know,
Yeah.
anyone in academia knows exactly what I'm talking about right now. But I'm you know, as far as we know, I will be teaching face to face. Our students will be having a limited amount of face to face teaching. Our term doesn't start until September, so we're kind of preparing for that now. But yeah, it's a very unprecedented year, I think, for all of
Yeah.
us. So, and I'm you know, glad about teaching face to face because, of course, I think most people would prefer that. You know, as long as we can all do it in a safe way.
Yeah.
So,
And in terms of this period with your own writing, and I noticed you called it your practice, which is interesting. And many writers don't do that, so that's an interesting thing, because how has your practice been influenced by this period? Have you been more creative, less creative, or has it just fluctuated with the time?
well, I think quite early on, I was lucky enough to get a commission from my local authority here in Greater Manchester. It was one of these schemes that, you know, there have been a few of them essentially trying to funnel money to artists and creatives who suddenly lost a ton of work, you know,
Yeah.
which I did as well. All my events and commissions and stuff like that had kind of been canceled. So I wrote a lyric essay and took photographs to go with it about the transition into this new way of living,
Wow.
sort of like while it was happening, which is the first time I've ever written so close. You know, they call it writing close to events, which was wild. And you know, I had so much kind of energy and adrenaline at that time, like everyone did. And I think this just gave me something to focus it into. So that was really cool, but also really exhausting because I wasn't able to just kind of check out of that time. I had to really like sit and look at what I was feeling all the time. And that was, you know, after a while, I just had to not write for some time. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I think since that happened, I've just been using this time not to write loads of new stuff, but to put together a manuscript and to kind of edit it, and it feels like a natural time to do that kind of work right now.
Sure. So the manuscript is a collection of pieces, or it's a longer piece?
Well, it's a collection of, it's an ever-changing thing, as you may know, but it is a collection of pieces. Yep. I do have a long project kind of on the back burner, which is, I guess, again, you know, hard to define, but it is one long narrative.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a collection of pieces like this one, you know, that are many things at once. Cool. And I'm kind of, some of it's been published other places, some of them are new. And it also features photography, which has been a kind of recent development in my work that I'm really excited about. So yeah, that's what I'm working on.
You mentioned the lyric essay. That strikes me as being from someone who doesn't have any formal education in English literature. I've got a sciences background. From lyric essay, it seems to be, I want to write this. I'm going to call it a lyric essay because I can do whatever I want, and I mean that in the best possible way. It seems to be this wonderful mishmash of form and style. And is that fair, or is that?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think you've cracked it. Let's not tell everyone else though, okay? Because you know, it is actually, no, really, it is. There are no rules when it comes to lyric essay.
Right.
I think if you are kind of ballsy enough to go, okay, I'm writing a lyric essay,
yeah,
then you can write a lyric essay, you know, because no one's going to say, oh, that's not a lyric essay ever.
Yeah.
So I really like that about it.
That's interesting. So it just seems to be that, but it is interesting that you kind of move from the formalism and cutting from the bottom style of journalism, and then maybe just going, okay, I can finally write whatever, and maybe it's not whatever the mood you're in at the moment. Maybe it's something for a longer piece that has to breathe and find its form. Yeah. Interesting. So at the moment you're working on the more perhaps editing side of that at the moment. Okay. Is there anything that you're working on kind of next, or are you kind of taking a breath?
Well, yeah, next I think I'll probably turn my attention to the long narrative that I've been working on for a couple of years, which is set in Vermont, which is where I'm from. So that's something that I think perhaps I don't want to work on it right now because I can't go there and see all the people I love there, and it's a little bit sad for me to think about right now. But I think I will go back to it. Yeah, I think so.
Great. Well, thanks again for taking the time. It's really nice to get a chance to talk to some of the people behind the pieces, which I'm going to steal, by the way. That's quite a helpful way to describe things. So yeah, it's been really nice to talk. Thanks again.
Thank you.